Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 572 XPG chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it just doesn't have any power. He can start it, he can kind of rev it, but as soon as he puts it in the wood, it just doesn't have anything. So with most of our repairs, the first thing we do is look in the fuel tank. And we find a generic fuel filter. A clean one though. So it's good that he's changing his filters. I think it's bad the style of filter he's using. We're going to pressure test that fuel line and the carburetor, and it looks like they're both holding 10 pounds of pressure. That's good. We're going to temporarily put his filter back on here and keep investigating, because I have been caught putting new filters on at this point and then finding a scored cylinder or something else and then having to go back and harvest my new filter. So let's take a look underneath the hood and we'll get that spark plug out and see what it does look like in the cylinder. We'll take a look at the air filter, make sure it's not just plugged up. This has got a nice big felt pleated filter on it. This is the kind of filter I recommend. We shine a light through and we can see light shooting through the filter. That means it's not all blocked up. The throat of the carb filter adapter looks good. No dirt is getting past that filter. There's only two sides of the scrunch. I picked the wrong side first. So we've got the spark plug out. We like the look of it. The color's nice. It's a little brown. We're looking inside the cylinder. Taking a pretty good look. I don't know if there's a show going on in there or what, but it looked alright. It's not scored. You know, a low power 572, you know, you might think that a crank seal is out, possibly a bearing, and it's sucking air, and that's why it doesn't have any power. And in those situations, you could also have a scored cylinder. But in this case, everything looks fine in the cylinder. And we're checking the compression. And what do we have here? 155. Can't complain about that. Put our gauge away. Checking for spark. Kind of silly because the guy already said it runs. Just doesn't have any power. I guess you get into habits, right? Picked the right side of the scrunch this time, so I got that going for me. So let's start digging into this thing a little bit, maybe run it. But what do we got here? Look how slow that primer bulb fills up. That's not normal. I mean, that's the clue right there. When you see that, there is something wrong. There's a restriction either in the fuel filter, a kinked fuel line maybe, pinched fuel line, or the microscreen in the carburetor. Possibly some other things I'm not thinking of right now. But when I see that, I usually start thinking microscreen in the carburetor. If I've witnessed a clean looking filter. So the screws that hold this air filter adapter and carburetor in place are Torx T20. There's two of them. We'll back them out. The air filter adapter, you can see it's blue colored. I think that they use the blue ones for the XPG models with the heated handles. heated. There's a heater between the air filter adapter and the carburetor. Here we're removing the wire for the autotune. You connect here for the connecting to the computer. If this wire is not connected when you finish this repair, the stop switch won't work either. Short fuel line between the carb and the purge bulb just came off. And this fuel line I'm about to pull off right here is the return line from the purge bulb to the tank. There we go. Now our air filter adapter is just about free to pull out of place. We still got some lines here. There we go. There was a clip on top of the carburetor that held that connector in place. And we've removed our air filter adapter. That piece right there is the heater between the carb and the air filter, part of the XPG models. That's a wire that connects it. And now there's, what do we got? We're taking the throttle cable off. We just put a little bit of slack in the you know, the thing, the whatchamacallit. Open the throttle a little bit and then hold it in place, and then when you let off the trigger, you got some slack in the cable and you can unhook that throttle cable. The ferrule will come right out of the holder there. Now I'm prying off the fuel line that goes from the filter to the carburetor. And there was two connectors, two snaps on the bottom of the carb that kind of locked it to the intake. I had removed those. Now these two screws on top here, only 2 of the 4 are coming out of the cover on the top of the carburetor. And those 2 hold that connector in place. So we're going to put those screws on the magnet on the back of our handy dandy carburetor stand. And I'm magnetizing my screwdriver there a little bit so I can pull them out. There we go. So now you can see I was able to remove that connector with just those 2 screws. And I can slide the carburetor away from the engine. And then it's just a matter of the white connector for the auto-tune. Pops out of the holder on the side of the carburetor, and then you push the little tab and split the connector. We've now harvested an auto-tune carburetor. Put the saw on the side there. There's a little bit of schmutz in there. We want to get rid of that. I'm taking 3 fingers and plugging the 3 holes so no dirt gets in there. And then we'll clean the dirt from the carburetor as well. Alright, we want to remove the secondary throttle valve assembly. 2 screws hold that in place, and there's a piece of linkage on it. So take a look at the linkage. It inserts in that piece and the carburetor from the outside in. And now we're going to remove the fuel pump cover and expose our micro screen. So I can see right now that it's brown and dirty. Get a closer look here. Look how brown that is. It's full of dirt. That dirt is blocking the passage of fuel into the innards of the carburetor. And that's why it's running sluggish. It's not getting enough fuel. Now, it's getting some fuel. It's just not flowing fast enough. Let's shine a light behind this screen here so you can kind of get a better idea. You can see some light passes through it. It's not completely blocked. Now it's brown, so I'm saying it's dirt. If it was black, I would suspect rubber fuel line deteriorating and accumulating in the screen. And if it was white, I would suspect possibly water or an ethanol related problem. So we've installed a new screen, and we're just going to put this carb back together. Now, autotune carburetors, I mean, they came out in 2012. I don't know if I've ever had to replace I've ever had to put a kit in one because the components were stiff. I've had to put kits in them because the components were worn out or damaged, but not stiff, like a stiff metering diaphragm kind of thing. I know they got the metal spiral wound diaphragms in a lot of them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is they've been a pretty reliable carburetor. You know, the microscreen isn't, that's dirt. That has nothing to do with the build quality of the carburetor. So we're just going to go through the reverse steps here and put it all back together. We connected our white auto-tune connector, snapped it back into the side of the carburetor. Now we're lining up the carb with the intake. And I said earlier there was a couple of tabs. Right now I'm just getting the throttle wire out from behind the carburetor so I don't pinch it in there. But now I'm pushing the carburetor up tight against the intake and locking those tabs in there. And it'll sit right there now. In fact, it's on there good enough I can start connecting things like this fuel line. Well, let's go. There we go. What are we going to do now? Kind of looking around a little bit lost. That's because the screws I took out of that that bracket on the top, they were still stuck to the magnet on my carb stand. So we'll screw this back down. These are the two screws that are left on the fuel pump cover of the carburetor that hold this electrical connector bracket down into place. You know, there's a lot of stuff bolted on these new carburetors. You know, it used to just be a cube. Now we got auto-tune modules and solenoids and wiring harnesses and all kinds of stuff connected to them. Alright, we're going to put our heater back in place and plug it in. Kind of get it lined up where it belongs. Put our throttle cable in place. That's pretty simple to do. Now there's a gasket right there. You don't want to blow that away. We're just cleaning up more schmutz. And fixing the seal on the top of the air filter adapter, I don't know, I must have displaced it when I was messing around because there was no dirt in the throat and that seal wasn't compromised. So there's a lot of things that got to get lined up here when you put this air filter adapter back in place. One of them is the choke lever. There's a spring on the linkage there. And it's what gives the stop switch its return ability. You got to make sure that you've got that located on the correct side of the choke linkage. I don't think I show you a good shot of that in here. So right now I'm putting the air filter adapter down into the rubber tabs that hold it in place so that everything can be lined up. The air filter adapter, the heater, and the carburetor. And once I got them lined up, I can push the screw in. I'll run that home. There we go. And we'll wiggle things around a little bit more. Taking a look at that choke linkage. And we'll get our other screw put in. Now I can tell you that I didn't show you a good shot of that choke linkage, but it goes back together the same way you took it apart. Alright, we got her tightened down. Now, what are we going to do? Get her big hand in the way so you can't see nothing. We got some wires that we got to connect. The green and black wires go in a holder on top of the carburetor. I didn't do that yet. I'm trying to put the long return line that goes from the primer down to the tank. Trying to get that on the back of the primer. I've seen Donnie Walker do this. He takes the primer bulb out of the blue holder there and exposes the line, pushes it through the hole and connects it to the primer, and then he pushes the primer back into the holder. If that makes sense. And I tried that after I watched his video and it works pretty good. I'm just stubborn. I keep doing it my old way. It's not the worst. There are some clips that hold that fuel line in place. I just got them lined up. And while I was babbling, I connected the short line from the purge bulb to the carburetor. Now we're connecting the green and black wire into the holder on top of the carburetor, and then we're plugging our I'm going to call it an autotune wire. When we connect the computer to, that gets connected into the green and black wires. There you go. Wires, wires, wires. There's some secret fiddling. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing there, because I can't see it either. I think I'm just routing the wires right there, making sure everything is clear of linkage and such. A little bit of a function test here. Make sure the linkage is right. Make sure the choke works the way it's supposed to. So we're going to get some fuel in here. And, well, before we do that, forgot we still got that old filter in there. So with these auto-tune saws, you want to use this blue filter. 503443203 is the part number. And we're going to put his fuel back in it. And if it runs right, we'll know that there was no fuel problems. Although we did find a problem with the micro screen. The nice thing about this funnel is you can see if there's any sediment in the fuel that's in the funnel. So if there would be, then I went to dump it back in there. Look at that, she primes up nice now. That bulb returns right away. So we're going to try and start this thing, and if it runs, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 572 XPG that had a plugged micro screen. Thanks for watching. Later.